Coming up on today's show, citizen journalist Giovanni reports from Montana. This is very exciting. I've been sending out citizen journalists to cover various races around the country. At the end of the show, you'll meet Giovanni, who filed a report from Montana. I'm sure you're going to hate it. On today's show, at a rally, Donald Trump yesterday called his campaign staff stupid. See, unlike Harris staffers, Trump's people are no different from their voters. When Trump asked if anyone in his crowd was voting for Harris, he then caught himself saying, quote, "Actually, I should say don't raise your hand if you're voting for Harris. It would be very dangerous. We don't want to see anybody get hurt, so don't raise your hand." Isn't that funny? It's so funny. We are now 28 days away from November 5th. Are you registered? What are you doing for the Democratic Party? Without much to offer voters, Trump is making this race about race. During a campaign stop in North Carolina, where the polling averages this morning show Trump leading Harris by just a few tenths of a percentage point, Trump promised North Carolina voters that if elected president, North Carolina's Fort Liberty will go back to being called Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg was named after Braxton Bragg, a slaveholding Confederate general known for his incompetence on the battlefield. He's one of the many reasons the South lost. And it was only named Fort Bragg in the lead up to and during World War I because inveterate racist President Woodrow Wilson wanted to send troops into Europe, and he worried Southern gentlemen would be reluctant to obey his draft if he didn't show some courtesy to the lost cause. And so military bases in the South were named after Confederate generals in order to convince Southerners to go fight in World War I. We're talking about 1917 and 1980. And that policy lasted until 1 year after Black Lives Matter protesters took to the streets after the murder of George Floyd. In response to systemic racism, Congress passed legislation in 2021 ordering the military to rename 9 bases previously named after Confederate generals. You know, naming a U.S. Army base after Braxton Bragg is tantamount to naming a U.S. Army base after Hermann Goering. But the GOP Senate nominee in Minnesota would probably be okay with that, considering his recent tweet where he said, quote, "The wrong guys won World War II." This is the Republican nominee for Senate in Minnesota, Royce White's tweet from 2 years ago, November 25th, 2022, Royce White. "It dawned on me today the bad guys won in World War II. There were no good guys in that war. The controlling interests had a jump ball. If you look closely, you see the link between liberalism and communism in the Allied forces." Yes, and if you look closely, you see the link between conservatism and Nazism on Wall Street in the Bush family in the lead up to World War II. Well, Rice was a power forward with a brief career in the NBA that got cut short by his crippling general anxiety disorder, which made it impossible for him to fly or to play for the Houston Rockets. He also has a history of calling women, quote-unquote, too mouthy, and often complains about the, quote-unquote, Jewish elites. He had to leave the NBA because of his anxiety, and he later found work hosting a show on Alex Jones's InfoWars. So you can get treated for your mental health issues, or you can become a MAGA Republican. It's your choice. Either go see a doctor, get medicated, or become a MAGA Republican. Royce is running against Democrat incumbent Amy Klobuchar. At the start of this summer, Minnesota was considered a possible swing state. Now it's solid blue, with Klobuchar leading Royce in some polls by as much as 14%. Appearing on Fox News Sunday, Trump campaign advisor Corey Lewandowski poo-pooed questions about violence after November 5th, when Donald Trump is expected to lose and not concede. Corey Lewandowski said Hillary, she refused to concede the election in 2016. Well, she conceded the next day. Lewandowski not only has a history of poo-pooing Republican violence, he also has a long history of being accused of committing Republican violence. For example, here are some headlines like, here we go, Corey Lewandowski, Donald Trump's campaign manager, is charged with battery. Singer Joy Villa says she wants justice to be served in sexual assault allegation against Corey Lewandowski. Lewandowski cast out of Trump operation after allegations of unwanted sexual advances. Trump donor Corey Lewandowski made unwanted sexual advances. Well, he's back. Lewandowski was Donald Trump's very first campaign manager back in 2016, but he had to leave after he was caught on tape physically assaulting a female reporter for Breitbart News. When Lewandowski was brought back to the Trump campaign this year, sort of as a minister without portfolio, the wife of a wealthy GOP donor who reported Lewandowski to Nevada police 3 years ago decided to speak out, saying she had been assured by Donald Trump and Don Jr. that they were done with Corey Lewandowski after he allegedly assaulted her. Trashelle Odom reportedly told Las Vegas police 3 years ago Corey Lewandowski stalked and then assaulted her at a Nevada Republican fundraiser. Lewandowski reportedly made a plea deal with Nevada prosecutors, agreeing to pay a $1,000 fine, take anger management classes, apologize to his victim, and perform a set number of hours of community service. Both Donald Trump and Don Jr. immediately called Trashelle Odom, the woman he assaulted, allegedly, that he pled out on. Was it allegedly? I'll say allegedly, but he pled out on it. Don Jr., Donald Trump, both called to apologize because at the time, Trashelle Odom was married to a wealthy GOP donor. Donald Trump made excuses for Corey Lewandowski's behavior, saying he was drunk. Trashelle Odom now says she was left with the impression by both Trumps that they would never have anything to do with Corey Lewandowski again. Meanwhile, Lewandowski's lawyers reportedly offered the woman $30,000 to keep the incident secret. She turned it down. But she did end up getting divorced right afterwards, which may be one of the reasons Trump has no problem rehiring Corey Lewandowski. In fact, hiring Corey Lewandowski, I'm guessing, probably, maybe, perhaps, made Trashelle Odom's ex-husband happy. I'm just assuming. I don't know if that's true, but given the misogyny running rampant in the Republican Party, I would assume one way of placating a wealthy MAGA donor is by hiring the man who allegedly assaulted his ex-wife. New polling out last week shows that Donald Trump is incredibly popular with divorced white male voters. I wonder why. Why would he be so appealing to divorced white male voters? Well, the only way Donald Trump can win is by making this about race, misogyny, violence, hatred of migrants, and of course, by lying. And those lies are lethal. Those lies are lethal. This is the mop-up, and I'll show you why they're lethal. It's not just politics. He justifies the lies by saying, that's just politics. I'll show you how dangerous these lies are. This is the mop-up for October 7th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Please subscribe to my channel and, of course, my newsletter. And once again, I ask you to hit the like button. That's the best way to make sure I remain in your feed. Leave a comment. I read all your comments. It's pretty much how I start each day. And above all, please share this episode. Many of you write very complimentary emails and ask how to help. Well, you help by leaving comments, correcting my mistakes, and sending me things to read. That improves the quality of the show. I have incredibly brilliant listeners, as made evident at these debate watch parties. It's humbling to hear how well informed my listeners are. So the best way to help this show and our community is by sharing each episode. Please forward the link of this episode on social media, in chat rooms, in an email, via text. Any growth this show has experienced over the past couple of months is due entirely to my listeners. It's bizarre. I don't promote this show. I don't belong to any podcasting conglomerate. Whatever success we have here is thanks entirely to my listeners. I mean that. So thank you for sharing these episodes. I mean that. Any success I have is due to the listeners sharing and commenting and participating, and Robert Smigel and Sam Cedar. And thanks to the idiots who buy worthless garbage over at shopdavidfeldman.com, like this 2024 election year souvenir. It's my worst case scenario map on a coffee mug. It's a reminder that all Harris has to do is win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and that gets her to 270. I'll have brand new polling later on. She's going to win, but right now it looks like it's going to come down to about 150,000 votes in these three states, as it did in 2016 and in 2020. It looks like it's going to be a couple of 100,000 votes in these three states that will decide who's our next president. Now, she will win the blue wall. It might be by a few tenths of a percentage point in several of these states, but she will win, and she will win the popular vote. What Kamala Harris cannot win is if the election gets thrown into the House of Representatives like it did in 1876, and that is the Republican plan. There are more red states. Look at this mug. There are more red states than blue states. If the election is decided by the House of Representatives like it was in 1876, then each state gets one vote. Now, I keep repeating this because this is the plan. This is what you have to keep your eye on. Ignore the polls. She's going to win. This is the plan. Now, each state, when it gets thrown into the House of Representatives, gets one vote. Wyoming gets the same number of votes as California, 1. There are more congressional delegations with a Republican majority in the House of Representatives than there are congressional delegations with Democratic majorities. So what does that mean? It means Trump wins if it gets decided by the House of Representatives. She is going to win the Electoral College. She is going to win the popular vote. Trump knows this. He's already working the way he did in 2020 to get this thrown into the House of Representatives. Each state gets one vote. California has 52 House members, 42 of whom are Democrats. So if it goes into the House of Representatives, the California delegation, 52 members will vote, and they will vote for Kamala Harris. That's one vote for Kamala Harris. Okay, 50 states each get one vote. Wyoming has one congresswoman. She is the election-denying Republican who defeated Liz Cheney in the 2022 primaries, and she is going to cast her vote for Donald Trump. That's one vote for Trump in Wyoming and one vote for Harris in California. Look at this coffee mug. You see how red? See how Kamala Harris gets to 270 in a sea of red? It's not a lot of people live in these red states. Okay? So that's the plan. It was the plan in 2020. It is the plan this year. Get the House of Representatives to pick the next president. And you do that by spreading doubt about the integrity of our elections. You create enough doubt to give the Supreme Court enough cover to say, well, there's insufficient evidence to declare this was a fair election. Therefore, the best way to resolve this is in the People's House, the House of Representatives. And it all sounds so reasonable. The 6-3 Republican majority in the Supreme Court saying, let the House of Representatives decide. And very few Americans know that if it gets thrown into the House of Representatives, how about that? Trump wins. It's weighted in Trump's favor. We didn't know that. How about that? Are you scared? Well, you should be. Halloween. It's no coincidence that Halloween comes right before Election Day. We are always scared before Election Day. We can't elect candidates based on policy. We just have to scare the crap out of voters. Well, Halloween is the end of this month, and over at shopdavidfeldman.com, we've got our new Halloween collection. If you want your orders to arrive before Halloween, you want to give it about 10 days to 2 weeks so you don't end up paying extra for shipping. And you're going to want this. You want this as part of your collection. First up, this is scary. It's a portrait of Melania and Donald at their 2029 inaugural ball. Because, after he wins in 2024, you can assume he'll also win in 2028 because there'll be no more elections. And this is a genuine collector's item. It's the official coffee mug from Donald Trump's 2029 inaugural ball. And next up for Halloween is Donald Trump flexing his fangs and asking, "Got blood?" It's perfect for Halloween, especially for your MAGA moron friend. Then there's Count Trumpula. I like this because it's so stupid. There's nothing clever about Count Trumpula, but it is I don't know if you can see the font. I don't know if you can see the detail in the font, but it makes for a great Halloween gift for your MAGA moron friends. Next up, remember the movie Friday the 13th, Part 2. This one says January the 6th, Part 2. And what else do we have? This is too cute by half. It's a poster for the Blair Witch Project, but it's the Blair Witch Project 2025. Yes, the Blair Witch Project 2025. I'd rather have you buy the I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea chef's apron than this. It's for your friend who thinks they're smarter than they actually are. I don't like this, but somebody said, go with it. I don't like it. And finally, Donald Trump as felony count Dracula. I also don't like this. I was thinking of Stop the Count Dracula. Maybe that's better. Stop the Count Dracula. Right? Not felony count Dracula. Maybe for tomorrow's show, I'll make a Stop the Count Dracula coffee mug because he's going to want to stop the count. Why did I go with felony count Dracula? And here's the Uncle Scam mug. Now I'm depressed. That's not funny. It should have been Stop the Count Dracula. And if you think this is bad, wait till Giovanni files his report. Citizen journalist Giovanni files a report from Montana. All right. Well, this is pretty scary stuff for Halloween. We do rush shipping, but why wait? Got to give it like 2 weeks, 10 days tops through regular mail. Then you got to pay extra for rush shipping, or you can be really smart and not buy any of this crap. You don't need this. You don't want this. All right, let's get. You don't want this, Uncle. Why can't you see this? How does this work? Uncle Scam. It's Trump, Uncle Scam. All right. Is anybody still here? Why? Why are you still here? Trust me, at the end of the show, when Giovanni files his report, that will be it. Nobody will ever listen to the show again. When Giovanni... Okay, serious. The average tropical storm that hits America results in 7,000 to 11,000 deaths over a 15-year period. That's according to a new study published in Nature magazine. When calculating the dead from storms like Helene, officials only take into account those who die in the immediate aftermath. But according to the study, these storms take an enormous toll on the life expectancies of survivors, who right after the storm experience a seemingly unrelated chain of events that ends up shortening their life expectancy. For example, to pay for the damages caused by these storms, many American citizens will deplete their retirement accounts, and that makes it harder for them to pay for future medical emergencies. Younger family members often move away from flood-damaged cities, leaving their older parents behind with no support system when a healthcare crisis requires constant support, like being driven to the doctor's office or picking up medicine, groceries, and of course, haggling with the health insurance company. The study says tropical storms are a bigger long-term cause of death than infectious diseases or car accidents. And all of this is caused by Exxon. We sued the tobacco companies to make them pay for the damages they cause, and we won. There's no reason Exxon isn't being sued out of existence by every state attorney general. I know they tried before. They need to try again. Exxon is responsible for these deaths, more so than the tobacco companies. Florida is now preparing to evacuate 6 million as a new storm approaches. If you're listening to me in Florida, if you're angry, blame it on ExxonMobil. This is the fault of ExxonMobil and their willing accomplices, their errand boys, the Republican Party. This is the fault of your governor, Ron DeSantis, who calls man-made climate change a hoax. These hurricanes are getting more lethal because greenhouse gases are heating up the Gulf of Mexico. The warmer the water, the more moisture in the atmosphere. The more moisture in the atmosphere, the deadlier the hurricanes. It's basic science. It's why Helene was so wet. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared another state of emergency in anticipation of Hurricane Milton, which is expected to smash into Tampa, Florida on Wednesday as a possible Category 4 with 140-mile-per-hour winds and a storm surge of nearly 15 feet. Milton began off the coast of Mexico as a Category 1, but as it moves east, hovering over extremely warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico, it's expected to mature into a Category 3 early Tuesday morning. Then, as it blows towards Florida, the warmer waters in the Gulf of Mexico will kick the storm up to a Category 3, possibly a 4, as it smacks pretty much against the entire east coast of Florida early Wednesday evening. They're expecting it to hit land around 5 p.m. Right now, Milton is expected to bypass the rest of the United States, possibly touching the tip of southern Georgia as it barrels out into the Atlantic Ocean. And as it heads away from Florida into the Atlantic, it will drop down, they say, to a Category 1. And then it starts moving towards Bermuda. Again, it hits Florida as a 3, possibly a Category 4. Because of the warming waters caused by climate change, it will be filled with moisture as it hits Florida as a 3 or a 4. As it passes over most of Florida, it gets dialed back to a 1 because going over land, there is no warm water to make the hurricane wetter. Then, as it clears Florida and heads into the Atlantic Ocean, its power is mostly depleted. It's down to a 1. And then, depending on the warmth of the Atlantic Ocean, it either stays a Category 1, possibly, hopefully falls apart, or if the Atlantic Ocean is warm, Milton can grow back in intensity heading into Bermuda by Saturday morning. That's how hurricanes work. And they're warm and more lethal because of ExxonMobil, because of the Republican Party. Republicans are responsible for these storms getting more intense. We are now discovering that some of Trump's biggest donors right now are oil executives whom, according to the Washington Post, Trump told to donate $1 billion to his campaign, calling it the best investment they can make since, if he's elected, he would reverse all of Joe Biden's climate-related executive orders. He had a meeting of oil executives at Mar-a-Lago during the spring, and he said, give me $1 billion, you'll make it back. At the same time, Trump and the Republicans are attempting to use Hurricane Helene as political fodder because they have nothing else to run on besides racism, misogyny, and hatred for migrants. All they have left after that, lies. They have nothing to run on. Friday, the jobs report came out with unemployment ticking back down, with 254,000 new jobs added in September. All this while the Federal Reserve is lowering interest rates because inflation now seems to be under control. The economy, it works for half this country, and they tend to vote. And this economy has never worked better for half this country. This is the best economy on record for half this country. The good news for Trump is that the National Hurricane Center says Hurricane Helene is now the deadliest storm to hit our country since 2005's Katrina. I say it's good news for Trump because he sees horrible news like this and says, okay, I can work with this. Trump immediately called this the worst hurricane response by a president and vice president since George W. Bush and Katrina back in 2005. See, Trump knows that a lot of Americans have amnesia. Why pussyfoot around? Most Americans are stupid. They remember Katrina, and they all remember that more than 3,000 died after Katrina because George W. Bush left New Orleans stranded for days. There were no National Guards troops to respond because too many of them were off fighting an illegal war in Iraq. This was 2005. So Trump is using the sense memory of that cataclysmic failure of government, Republican government, where George W. Bush ignored warnings from his own FEMA director, and Trump is trying to transpose that memory over Hurricane Helene. He figures if Bush was to blame for Katrina and Helene is almost as bad as Katrina, then Biden can be blamed for Helene. This is how he almost successfully preys on stupid voters. I mean, he successfully preys on stupid voters. The question is, how many of them are going to vote? What he conveniently leaves out is that Project 2025 calls for the complete elimination of small business association loans after major disasters. Now, one of the primary ways communities get back up on their feet after a disaster is the federal government lends money to businesses, which Project 2025 says should be privatized. These loans to small businesses after a disaster should be privatized because we know that private corporations, that banks, lenders, would lend money to flood-ravaged communities at low interest rates. Why would we doubt that? What evidence is there that lenders would take advantage of flood-damaged communities and charge them exorbitant interest rates? That would never happen. Project 2025 also calls for major cutbacks in disaster preparedness. We don't need to spend money on that. And to save money, Project 2025 says FEMA must raise the standard, the threshold for emergency declarations. See, Republicans say the problem isn't oil companies causing the hurricanes to get deadlier. The problem is there are too many damn emergency declarations, and they're expensive. Every time there's a massive hurricane, FEMA spends our money and declares an emergency. Project 2025 says we need to make it harder to declare an emergency after a storm. And, of course, make it so the states are less reliant after these storms, less reliant on the federal government. And good luck with that, because every state most likely to be in the path of a hurricane is what they call a taker state. Most red states are the ones hit primarily by climate change, and they are what are called taker states. These are states that take more from the federal government than they contribute in taxes. And these taker states, for some reason, think the federal government is too big. Project 2025 also calls for the privatization of the National Weather Service. Would you trust a corporation to tell you when a storm is hitting and how bad it's going to be? You think this corporation, whoever runs the National Weather Service, would only be in the weather business? No, they diversify. You don't think it would diversify to make sure it had plenty of conflicts of interest, to make all its forecasts questionable? Would you trust, looking at climate change, would you trust a corporation with your life? You've seen how well that works when it comes to health care. You want the National Weather Service to be McKinsey? Bain Capital? Who would you trust other than the federal government? Politico reports this morning that close White House aides to Donald Trump say as president, he refused giving money. He refused to declare an emergency while California got slapped by wildfires. White House aides had to provide evidence to Trump that by not providing emergency aid, Trump would also be punishing districts in California that voted for him. Only then, when he realized that Trump voters in California would suffer, then he decided to declare an emergency after the California wildfires. It's worth remembering that back in 2018, at least 3,000 Americans died when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. In 1917, Puerto Ricans were granted U.S. citizenship, but they don't get to vote for president. They also have zero congressional representation. They don't have a congressperson or a senator. And that's what happens when a U.S. citizen who can't vote gets hit by a massive hurricane when a Republican is in office. Trump figured, why bother saving people when there's nothing in it for me? That's what he said to General John Kelly about the soldiers buried in Arlington. Why? He asked. What was in it for them? This is a president who refuses to admit he's ever wrong. He is incapable of admitting to a mistake. And because of that, he must lie. Part of Trump's psychosis is eventually he begins to believe each lie. It's not just that he can't admit failure, it's his delusions of grandeur that allow him to believe he's telling the truth when he's lying. Now, that might work when trying to get people to lend you money to prop up a casino that you know is about to go bankrupt. But when you're president and you can't admit mistakes, and then when you lie, and then you begin to believe your lie, and then threaten to destroy anyone who calls you out on your lies, then millions of people end up dead. We know this for a fact. We know that at least 3,000 died in Puerto Rico because of Donald Trump's neglect of Puerto Rico after Maria. And I began this block by telling you about this Nature magazine report that shows storms like Maria over a 15-year period kill anywhere between 7,000 to 15,000 additional people. A storm like Maria, I would assume 50,000 additional people. Nobody reports on this, but it has taken longer to get Puerto Rico back up on its feet than any other hurricane that's hit the United States. Puerto Ricans don't get to vote. So this story never got the traction of, say, Hurricane Katrina. 80% of Puerto Rico's population was still without power 1 month after Maria hit. Half the sewage system in Puerto Rico was not working 1 month after Maria hit. This was 2017. Hospitals were on backup generators and had to provide limited services. In the end, 60% of Puerto Ricans, American citizens, who applied for FEMA relief were rejected. During the 2018 to 2019 government shutdown, Trump, in violation of the law, ordered relief money earmarked for Puerto Rico to be redirected towards Texas and Florida, which he carried in 2016. Billions that had been promised to Puerto Rico got tied up in red tape after Maria, and it took the Biden administration almost 4 years later to untangle it all. But Trump called his response to Puerto Rico, quote, an unsung success, unquote. When Republicans take power, they promise smaller government. And every time they're in charge, a disaster strikes, and they remind us what exactly they mean by smaller government and what smaller government looks like. San Juan's mayor, Carmen Cruz, 1 year after the storm, blamed Trump for all 3,000 deaths from Hurricane Maria. And we know that it's more than 3,000. People are still dying from this hurricane. I told you about this report in Nature magazine. Let's go full screen here. This is what the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, Carmen Cruz, said about a year later. This is what she said about a year after the storm. Quote, the administration killed the Puerto Ricans with neglect. The Trump administration led us to believe they were helping when they weren't up to par, and they didn't allow other countries to help us. Donald Trump wouldn't allow other countries like Cuba to help Puerto Rico because that would be humiliating. That would be admitting defeat. So he let the people of Puerto Rico die. That's what he did. She said the administration killed the Puerto Ricans with neglect. But there he was, Donald Trump. All last week, right after Helene hit, Donald Trump insisted we must not politicize Hurricane Helene. So responsible. And then right after that, on the very same day, Trump said Kamala Harris is spending, quote, all her FEMA money housing migrants. No, nothing political there. Her FEMA money. Then Trump immediately claimed that Brian Kemp, the Republican governor of Georgia, couldn't get Joe Biden on the phone for help. The truth is, Joe Biden kept calling Brian Kemp, but Brian Kemp, the governor, was too busy surveying the damage to call the president back. But despite Donald Trump's lies, the Georgia governor publicly thanked FEMA and Joe Biden. Here is Brian Kemp, the Republican governor of Georgia. Here he is saying he's actually getting more than he needs from President Biden. Here we go.
So I just spoke, the president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, you know, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that. But we've had FEMA embedded with us since, you know, a day or two before the storm hit in our state operations center in Atlanta. We got a great relationship with them. We've been in touch with our congressional delegation, with Speaker Burns, the legislative delegation. And so, you know, thankfully we have an experienced team that's used to this. And just like the expedited disaster relief that we're requesting, they have acknowledged receipt of that, and I'm sure that they'll take care of that very quickly.
That's the Republican governor of Georgia thanking FEMA and Joe Biden for their response. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, a Republican, called the federal government's response after Helene, quote unquote, superb. You see, this is a problem for Republicans. South Carolina was the second hardest hit right after North Carolina. Republicans get elected running against the evil government. Government is the enemy. But when disaster strikes, it's always the government that steps in, not Franklin Graham's Samaritan's Purse, a faith-based relief agency that pays him anywhere between $600,000 to $1 million a year. It's not the Red Cross. It's not the United Way. It is FEMA. When Republicans are in charge, they cut funding for FEMA. They cut funding for disaster preparedness. And then when disaster strikes under them, they say, see, you can't trust the federal government. Of course we can't trust the federal government because you're in charge of it. Just 2 weeks before COVID struck, Donald Trump offered up a 2021 budget proposal that would cut funding for the CDC by 16%. All 4 of Donald Trump's budget proposals during all 4 years of his presidency called for massive double-digit cuts to the CDC. And then who does he blame COVID on? The CDC. 2 years before COVID hit, Trump fired all the pandemic specialists. What do we need them for? He also eliminated a department of the federal government that studied zoonotic leaps of viruses from animals to humans. The last thing Republicans like voters to be reminded of is how much better Democrats are at governing, especially when it comes to preventing disasters and then dealing with them. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, when he was governor, he was a Republican. He was slammed in 2012 by his party for hugging Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, when Barack Obama came through with massive relief after Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey. Obama was running for re-election against the coward and the liar Mitt Romney. And members of the Romney campaign accused Chris Christie, the Republican, of disloyalty, of losing the election for Mitt Romney by thanking Obama, by hugging Obama, and drawing attention to what a great job Obama had done just 2 weeks before the election when he came through with hurricane relief. And the Republicans accused Obama of politicizing Hurricane Sandy by showing up with federal dollars and saving the people of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. When all is said and done, 1 million Americans died from COVID, and that is Donald Trump's fault. 1 million, and we've undercounted. 1 million is an undercount. 1 million Americans died from COVID, and that is Donald Trump's fault. 1 million Americans died from COVID, and that is Donald Trump's fault. 1 million Americans died from COVID, and that is Donald Trump's fault. It's the largest, see, and these cups, I just slammed it. That's how well made this Uncle Scam cup is. If it can resist my fury, it can handle anything. Did I mention that 1 million Americans died from COVID and it's Donald Trump's fault? It is the largest number of deaths from COVID in sheer volume and per capita for any member of the industrialized world. Now, you can try to rewrite history. You can say, well, the Chinese undercount. They also completely shut their country down. So you want to tell me they undercount their deaths? You couldn't step outside when COVID hit China. The truth is, when it comes to COVID, Trump crapped the bed. He didn't understand, and he still doesn't understand, how government works. So hospitals went without ventilators and much-needed emergency equipment. He tried to fight COVID much the same way George Bush and Dick Cheney tried to fight in Iraq, on the cheap. Trump doesn't believe in government, so his immediate response to COVID was to bring in corporate America. And in a crisis, all corporate America has to offer is, how can we, corporate America, get rich off the government's response to this crisis? Remember Donald Trump's $1 trillion Paycheck Protection Program? One of the great transfers of wealth from American taxpayers to the richest 1%, the Paycheck Protection Program. They were protecting jobs. Yeah, that's what they told us. Instead of giving out $1 trillion to the American people, $1 trillion was loaned to the job creators because they can spend it so much better than the American people, who will just waste it on food, rent, or health insurance. Under Donald Trump, stimulus money went primarily to these so-called job creators who were supposed to keep their small businesses and or corporations opened to protect the paychecks. But that money didn't go to protecting paychecks. It went to just rich people. It went to rock bands. I think Vampire Weekend, the band Vampire Weekend, got some paycheck protection money. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. But, it went to bands, rock bands that, they canceled their performances and they just kept the money without paying their roadies or anyone else besides the members of the band. These now I don't know about Vampire Weekend. These job creators took the loans. Please Google that. I owe Vampire Weekend an apology if they didn't take PPP money, or if they did take the PPP money and paid their roadies. So I got to be careful there. So I take that back. But most of these people fired all their employees, kept the loan, and because of very generous loan forgiveness rules baked into the loans, they walked away with all of it, billions of dollars. Under Trump, COVID relief turned out to be a $1 trillion giveaway to rich people while Americans died. That's a public-private partnership. That's how public-private partnerships work. Instead of using government employees, we contract out to corporations who do a much more expensive job and accomplish nothing other than taking government money. Because of the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the reasons the rich people got way richer while the middle class shrunk and the poor got poorer during 2020 is because of Trump and Republican programs like the Paycheck Protection Program. But let's not politicize Hurricane Helene, says Donald Trump. CNN compiled a laundry list of Trump's Helene-related lies. There are too many to count. But these lies are lethal. When Trump lies, people die. In a natural disaster, it is the height of irresponsibility to spread lies. The internet is still down in parts of the flood-ravaged communities. People are stranded. Some have guns, and many might panic. The last thing anyone in a disaster needs is their neighbor to be terrified, to mistakenly believe they've been forgotten or are being punished for how they voted. Trump lied last week and said Biden is only providing $750 to victims who lost their homes. Trump kept repeating the lie that $1 billion had been stolen from FEMA in order to provide housing for migrants. Trump lied and said Biden ordered FEMA to ignore North Carolina's red districts. Think about how dangerous this is. Now, imagine being trapped in an elevator, waiting for help, and a former president, the nominee of a leading party, says Joe Biden has ordered FEMA to leave anyone who voted for Trump, to leave them trapped in that elevator. Imagine what that would do to you as you're trapped in the elevator. You'd think it's partisan cleansing. The FEMA is cleansing the electoral map. That's what Trump, that's the seed that Trump is, he's not even planting it, he's saying it. Trump lied and said there were no helicopter rescues from North Carolina flood victims. Now, I want you to think back. I mean, I wish none of you ever experienced an emergency, but all of us have. Think about a loved one in a hospital. When does an emergency become a real emergency? When you begin to believe that help, when you begin to believe that relief is not on its way. What gets us through an emergency is hope, a belief that eventually it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. When all hope is gone, panic sets in. Some people just have full-bore anxiety attacks, while others panic by looting, stealing, and turning on their neighbors. And some of these people have guns. It is unimaginable that someone this reckless, Donald Trump, could be this close to getting back inside the Oval Office again. Trump's National Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, when asked to comment on Trump's lies, responded that FEMA has no money for the victims of Hurricane Helene because Kamala Harris stole it all. This is Donald Trump's National Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt. She was asked to comment about Donald Trump's dangerous lies about the hurricane response, and she says, the fact is, FEMA has no money for the victims of Hurricane Helene because Kamala Harris stole it all. This is a level of lying unlike anything we've ever seen in this country. You cannot work for Donald Trump if you don't tell his version of the truth, which is to lie. It's why J.D. Vance, a Marine, a Yale Law School graduate, insisted the day after the debate that Trump won in 2020, because J.D. Vance knows you cannot be in Trump's orbit if you don't tell the same lies. Let's get our lies straight. The New York Times reports this morning that these lies about the federal government's response is endangering the lives of FEMA workers. Because Donald Trump has demonized FEMA, there's now talk in flood-ravaged areas of FEMA coming to round up citizens and place them in tent cities and camps. There's talk of politically cleansing Trump districts. There are reports of some rural residents talking about forming militias to keep FEMA employees from entering their towns. Trump is making it unsafe for FEMA workers to serve the people who vote for Donald Trump. So what is the truth? Let's look at the actual federal government's response to North Carolina, which was hit the hardest. As of this morning, 700 FEMA workers are on the ground right now. 1,000 National Guard troops have been deployed throughout North Carolina. 1,400 residents of North Carolina are now living in hotels thanks to FEMA. $30 million so far has been dispersed for housing assistance. People are suffering in North Carolina and South Carolina. But the governors of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia all say FEMA is doing a fantastic job. They're on top of it. Now, there is a political component to all this, despite Donald Trump promising not to politicize Hurricane Helene. The election is less than a month away, and people who are hit by an emergency are only thinking about their own survival, not how this election plays out. Rural parts of Georgia and rural parts of North Carolina and Georgia have been hit especially hard. And why is this significant? Well, first off, it's significant because even though they tend to vote for Trump, they are our fellow citizens, and they are suffering, and they need our help. That's why it's significant. It's also significant to a lesser degree because North Carolina and Georgia each have 16 electoral college votes, and North Carolina and Georgia are very much in play. We know Trump is going to challenge the election results after he loses on November 5th. And he's going to claim Joe Biden sabotaged Trump's chances of winning by abandoning key Trump precincts in hurricane relief. That is what he's saying right now. And, come November 6th, after he loses, the mists of time, the fog of Hurricane Helene, some people will believe that FEMA was ordered to politically cleanse the electoral maps of Georgia and North Carolina. Early reports now show that in 2020, Trump did in fact win 61% of the North Carolina counties hit hardest by Hurricane Helene. Western North Carolina was hit the hardest with as much as 30 inches of rain. No other state got it worse than North Carolina. They had the most fatalities. Western North Carolina is Trump country. 23 out of 25 North Carolina counties that are eligible for disaster relief all went to Trump in 2020, most of them by double digits. It's worth noting that there are one or two blue counties in Western North Carolina that also got hit really hard by Helene. Asheville, North Carolina, is Harris country, and that's in Western North Carolina as well. There is a political component to all of this because Trump is going to lose North Carolina, and he's going to blame it on FEMA. In 2020, Trump won 54% of the Georgia counties hit hardest by Hurricane Helene. Now, Monday, today, is the last day to register to vote in Georgia. Georgia elections, as we all know, are administered by Republicans, specifically Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, who you all remember, resisted Trump's efforts to steal the election back in 2020. I just need, 11,000 some odd, find me 11,000 more votes. Okay. Civil rights attorneys are now filing motions requesting that the Secretary of State for Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, extend the registration date past today. Okay? Since primarily red counties have been hit the hardest in Georgia, and voting registration is affected, okay? If Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, says we've been hit by the hurricane, these rural counties people had trouble registering, we're going to extend the voting registration past Monday. What do you think Donald Trump is going to say a month from now? He's going to say extending voter registration because of the storm, that invited election fraud. That's what he's going to say. Even though it's his voters who are benefiting by the extension of the deadline for voter registration, doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter reason. It's about confusion. It's about chaos. This stuff is very hard to keep track of and remember. And that's what Donald Trump preys upon. It doesn't matter that Georgia, the Republican Secretary of State, might extend voter registration in rural counties, Trump counties, that were destroyed by the hurricane. It doesn't matter that that benefits Trump. After he loses Georgia, he will spin it that making it easier to vote, invited fraud. And then the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan, is going to hold confusing hearings about election fraud and migrants sneaking into Georgia to vote. And none of it's going to be true. Doesn't matter, because it's hard to keep track of. It's confusing. And we don't have a news media. All the newspapers are going under. This is the end of a democracy or a democratic republic. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is now blaming Democrats for, for Hurricane Helene. Let me just say that again. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is now blaming Democrats for Hurricane Helene. Well, of course she is. You might remember she blamed the California wildfires on Jewish space lasers. And I wish I were making that up. This is what she tweeted. Yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. October 3rd, 2024, and it got 25,000 likes on Twitter. Yes, they can control the weather. Who? The Jews with their space lasers? Well, you know, Marjorie, you're almost right. You're a little confused. Destroying the weather is not the same as controlling the weather. Your party is destroying the weather by denying climate change, but the weather can't be controlled. But Republicans believe it can. Enough of them do. And she has a map. She transposed a map of all the counties hit hardest by Hurricane Helene in her tweet, and she said, Hurricane Helene hit red districts hardest. They can control the weather. There are many ways. Anti-democratic authoritarian forces create distrust in our institutions. One of the ways is by putting imbeciles in Congress, imbeciles like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is an imbecile. Whenever Marjorie Taylor Greene speaks, I always wonder if democracy is such a good idea. And that's the plan. That's why they send people like her to Washington, send so many ignoramus to Washington. It makes some of us wonder if politicians and voters are smart enough to be trusted with the levers of power. J.D. Vance, asked to comment on Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet, all he would say is, quote, she's a strong woman leader. Now, why did he say that? Because he's a misogynist who is subliminally saying the woman's an idiot, and this is why women really belong in the kitchen, because they're all stupid. By calling Marjorie Taylor Greene a strong woman leader, he's subliminally reminding voters, see how stupid women are? J.D. Vance then called Marjorie Taylor Greene a friend. He said she is loyal and, quote unquote, one hell of a congresswoman. To which Vance should have been asked, okay, name one thing, if she's one hell of a congresswoman, name one thing she did for her district. Name one bill she passed. Name one bill she voted for that benefits her constituents. Trump returned to Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday, just 3 months after he was shot there. The New York Times this morning has a story about first-term Arizona Republican Congressman Eli Crane being given a large stage in the Republican Party to claim the assassination attempt at Butler was, quote unquote, an inside job. Congressman Eli Crane is warning of a possible mole inside the Secret Service. He also said the FBI can't be trusted to investigate the 2 assassination attempts because they don't want to know the truth. By the way, Eli Crane's only other claim to fame is referring to blacks as, quote unquote, colored people. I wish I were lying. Back in July of 2023, Crane introduced a bill that would prevent the military from considering race as part of its recruitment policy. There's a feeling among many Republicans that the military is recruiting too many non-whites. So he he attached an amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill in July of 2023 that would prevent the military from diversity and equity and reaching out to anybody other than white military members. He said, quote, "My amendment has nothing to do with whether or not colored people or black people or anybody can serve." Sure it isn't. Sure it isn't. Crane is from Arizona. His colleague from Arizona, the wonderful Paul Gosar, said in January of this year, quote, "There aren't enough white people in the military," unquote. And I could read you some quotes from Tommy Tuberville about white nationalists serving in the military, where he says, they may be white nationalists, but they're American. Yeah, but they shouldn't be serving in our military, Tommy Tuberville. Meanwhile, the genius Eric Trump. Boy, you know, he's accomplished so much in life, and it's not because of nepotism. I mean, he could get wherever he is just based on his wits. His father is so lucky. Eric Trump's father is so lucky that Eric Trump decided to work for Donald Trump. Anybody would want Eric Trump to work for them. Eric Trump just came out and said it Saturday night while opening for his dad. Eric Trump told the people of Butler, Pennsylvania, that Democrats were behind both assassination attempts. This is stochastic terrorism by its very definition. Return to the scene of where your father got shot, and tell thousands of people in attendance the Democrats were behind both assassination attempts. That is stochastic terrorism. Eric Trump told the crowd, quote, "They tried to smear us. They came after us. They impeached him twice. And then, guys, they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him, and it's because of the Democratic Party," unquote. That is stochastic terrorism. Okay? They impeached him twice, and then, guys, they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him, and it's because of the Democratic Party, unquote. Also on the stage in Butler Saturday was Elon Musk, who warned once again that the Democrats are stealing the 2024 presidential election. The guy who owns Twitter, the New York Times did a study of his tweets. 1/3 of Elon Musk's tweets are misinformation. And he's now saying that the Democrats are busing migrants into key battleground states, fast-tracking their citizenship so that they can vote for Harris. Meanwhile, Elon's mom picked up on her son's lie and tweeted, let me go big here. This is May Musk. This is what she tweeted. So Elon tweeted, "Super important to get all your friends and family to register to vote. Georgia's registration deadline is Monday." That was what Elon tweeted. So May Musk retweeted and said, quote, "The Democrats have given us another option. You don't have to register to vote. On election day, have 10 fake names, go to 10 polling booths, and vote 10 times. That's 100 votes, and it's not illegal. Maybe we should work the system too." Wow. Maybe we should work the system too. Go vote 10 times, May Musk. I don't know. Are you an American citizen? I don't know. Do what you just said. Do it, May. See if you get caught. See, in case you've never voted, she'll get caught. In case you've never voted before, May, and I doubt you have, is she an American citizen? I don't know enough about the Musk family. In order to vote in this country, you have to register. And then when you go to vote, you give your name and your address. And they open up the book and they check the roster. And if your name is there and your address is there, then they ask you to sign your name and you go vote. That's how it works. And there's no fraud. Since 2000, they've computerized the whole thing. There are no examples. Nobody ever gets caught sending 10 people with 10 fake names to go vote. It never happens. Never, ever, ever, ever happens. Now, for example, if someone else signs your name, you go to vote and somebody else signs your name, that means you can't vote. A crime has been committed, and you're issued a provisional ballot, and they get to the bottom of it. Believe it or not, something this simple and beautiful is being destroyed by the Republicans with their lies. If you may try it. I mean, I probably shouldn't be encouraging you to do this, but go try it. Vote 10 times under 10 fake names. If you're so convinced it's that easy to vote, try it and see what happens. Now, I can't legally encourage anybody to do this, but I don't know. If I were Joe Biden, I would taunt people to try it. We would just lock these morons up. President Biden, don't do what I just said. I don't want to, but if you do try it, you're going to get caught. President Biden told reporters on Friday that he's worried the presidential election won't be peaceful. Where would he get an idea like that? Biden said he was certain the election will be fair and the votes will be tabulated. What he can't guarantee is that Donald Trump will concede defeat and also won't encourage his supporters to turn violent the way he did last time. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, who sat on the January 6th committee and is pretty much running unopposed for Senate in California, he was asked Sunday about President Biden's fear of violence in the lead up to and after Election Day. Adam Schiff said he agreed with Joe Biden that the election would be fair, but said he can't guarantee, because of Donald Trump, that it will be peaceful. George Washington ran for president in 1788. He was sworn in as our first president in 1789. By the way, I got that right. I wasn't quite sure on last week, and I got it right. I asked you to comment if I got it wrong. George Washington, sworn in as our first president in 1789. For 231 years, except for maybe Lincoln's first inauguration, we have had a peaceful transfer of power for pretty much 231 years. That ended in 2020 because of Donald Trump, as well as the anti-democratic forces propping him up. There are enablers, not just in Congress. There are enablers on Wall Street, the oil companies, Putin. One man can't do this all by himself. Once again, in 2024, it's becoming abundantly clear that the Republican Party, not just Trump, but the Republican Party in Washington will not accept the results of this election after Donald Trump loses. What we saw in 2020 was a Republican Party leadership in Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and Pennsylvania that did accept the results. Yes, they sent false electors in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, but Republican state houses, Republican governors, Republican secretaries of state would not go along with Rudy Giuliani, even though they voted for Donald Trump. People like Rusty Bowers, the Speaker of the Arizona State House, voted for Trump. Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, the Pennsylvania Republican legislature that flew to the Oval Office to meet with Donald Trump. They all voted for Trump. They would not go along with his election lie. I have faith in a lot of Republicans in swing districts. I don't have faith in Washington Republicans, but I do have faith in Republicans on the state level who will not participate once again in Trump's coup. But that doesn't mean Trump isn't going to make life impossible and, God forbid, bloody for them. Every single Republican who goes up against Donald Trump says it was the death threats. It was the death threats. Constant death threats. And my Republican listeners go, well, Trump didn't order people to swat Nikki Haley 3 times. No, that's what stochastic terrorism is. When Eric Trump says in front of thousands of people, Democrats tried to assassinate my father, he doesn't have to tell anybody to do anything. That's how stochastic terrorism works. So the question we have to ask ourselves this morning is, how much do you believe America should be what? What should we call this? A democratic republic? A democratic republic kleptocracy? A democratic republic oligarchy? Something resembling a democratic republic? Do you trust the American people to govern themselves? The trick Donald Trump and his enablers are playing on reasonable people is they are slowly convincing too many of us that Americans are too stupid to govern themselves. Have we reached a tipping point? Is this the inflection where we concede that Americans are just too stupid to govern themselves? It could be. It could be. I mean, in order to spend $1 trillion a year to build weapons to kill imaginary enemies while our schools are crumbling, kids are hungry, they would have to make us incredibly stupid to go along with $1 trillion a year spent on imaginary enemies. To allow 50,000 Americans to die each year because they don't have health insurance. To have hundreds of thousands of Americans die each year because they have health insurance but they can't afford to see a doctor. They would have to make us incredibly stupid to believe that Medicare for all is a bad thing, even though Medicare is beloved. How stupid have they made this country that we're not clamoring for Medicare for all? There is a professional managerial class in America, hyper-educated, insulated, so they think, seemingly, so they think, immune from the vicissitudes of politics. And as they sink deeper into their comfort zones, they quietly question whether maybe Donald Trump and the people behind him are correct. They say, well, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. But, maybe people can't be trusted with the vote. Maybe democracy is a bad idea. Don't get me wrong. I'm a child of the Enlightenment, and I'm voting for Kamala Harris, but should everyone be allowed to vote? I mean, why should I only get one vote, the same vote as somebody who isn't as hyper-educated as I am? People believe this. People on our side believe that not everybody should vote. And of course, there are a lot of leftists who say there is no difference between the two parties, so why vote? Do you believe there's no difference between the two parties? Do you? You can't see any difference between the two parties. None whatsoever. Maybe you should take your nose out of Marx and Engels and pick up Congressional Quarterly. I told one of my children. There's no difference between the two parties. To which I say, see what happens if Trump finds his way back into the Oval Office. It won't be that gradual. It'll happen. It'll all happen. What if he gets to be president? It will not be gradual. If you're a white male Christian and you have some savings, if you're heterosexual, you won't notice a thing at first. God forbid Trump becomes president, and he's not going to be president. But God forbid he becomes president. First up, the people of color. ICE, baby. ICE, this is how it goes. ICE starts rounding up people of color. They start shipping them back to Haiti, right? The Haitian immigrants have to go. And then they're going to realize, why are we shipping? It's expensive. Why don't we just place them in tent cities, privatize the tent cities, and put them to work? ICE will swamp our institutions. In the first 100 days of the Trump administration, ICE will swamp all our institutions with so many arrests. We will not be able to process all these people as they fall through the cracks. And trust me on this, U.S. citizens, especially people of color, will be, quote unquote, accidentally rounded up. And because they can't produce ID, maybe, or because they have a bench warrant on a busted taillight that they haven't paid, they will languish in jail for weeks, months, years. Our system isn't equipped to process all these arrests. The problem at the border is we don't have enough immigration judges to process these migrants. The problem in this country is we don't have enough judges, and we don't have a system equipped. We don't have enough public defenders. We don't have enough lawyers to handle all these arrests that Donald Trump is planning. He's, the lesson, Maya Angelou famously said, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Read Mein Kampf. Read, Donald Trump certainly does. Listen to what Trump is saying he's going to do. He's going to deport 14 million migrants. That means rounding up millions and millions and millions of people. And as J.D. Vance said before he was a MAGA Republican, you're going to trust the government to get that right? J.D. Vance said that when he was going to Yale Law School. He wrote a column that he asked, and it got deleted, for a magazine. He wrote a column saying, Republicans don't trust the government to do anything right, but somehow we trust them to get rid of 14 million migrants legally and properly? Stephen Miller, who was Donald Trump's immigration czar, last year he told the New York Times there would be what he called a blitz. He said immigration lawyers would be overwhelmed by the scope and magnitude of these mass deportations. Any activists, he said, this is the quote, any activists who doubt President Trump's resolve in the slightest are making a drastic error. This is what Stephen Miller said. Trump will unleash the vast arsenal of federal powers to implement the most spectacular migration crackdown. He goes on to say, this is what he told the New York Times, the immigration legal activists won't know what's happening, unquote. They've learned from their mistakes. Only hire loyal people. They now know how to seize the levers of power. No difference between the two parties. I would tell you to go F yourself and get really angry. I got a kid who believes that. So you have to respect the opinions of your kids or they stop talking to you. So you go, okay, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. There's no difference between the two parties. Remember, get a dog is what I'm telling you. I think that I don't even have a dog. I got nobody. The slightest, I got kid. Like, how does George W. Bush? My kids, I have one kid who wouldn't talk to me for a year because I had these reading glasses that fell down along my décolletage, and we were eating with her friends, and some crumbs ended up on the reading glasses along my décolletage, and she was so disgusted, she stopped talking to me. But Jenna Bush's father kills 1 million innocent Iraqis, has nothing but wonderful things to say about him. What was I talking about? Is anybody still here? Okay, people, this was going to be a short show. And I don't know who's here, but I'm telling you, when Giovanni files his report from Montana, I promise you this will be the last time anybody listens to this show. That's coming up. Stephen Miller. Right out of the Third Reich yearbook. I mean, this is the guy who handed the Goebbels the cyanide for the kids in the bunker. That face. I know you're not supposed to make fun of how people look, but is he a people? He's not a people. Stephen Miller's a monster. I mean, this guy wakes up every day and he just feels lousy every day and he wants to punish people for how he feels. Remember, according to a recent Associated Press poll, a majority of Republicans call Donald Trump their most trusted source for news and information. Even worse, according to a new Gallup poll, 28% of registered Republicans say they don't trust the election count to be accurate this year. See where we're heading? Last week, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI issued a joint intelligence memo warning that domestic terrorists with election-related grievances are preparing to commit acts of violence. And who would that be? Domestic terrorists with election-related grievances who are planning to commit acts of violence. Who would that be? Would that be? Who would that be? RNC co-chair Who'd that be? Lara Trump. How did she get that job? Boy, is Donald Trump lucky that Lara Trump said, okay, I'll do you a favor and I'll be RNC co-chair. She said that this year. She said, I mean, she could get hired by any corporation. Who wouldn't want the genius Lara Trump working for them? Donald Trump is so lucky that he's got RNC co-chair Lara Trump, who's watching over the finances to make sure that every single donation is somehow funneled through one of Donald Trump's 7 limited liability companies that nobody knows owned by Donald Trump. This is when the final story is told. Billions, and I don't know about billions, hundreds of millions this year, unaccounted for, all being funneled to limited liability companies that provide printing services, booze for events. Who's the company? RNC co-chair Lara Trump said on Sunday that her father-in-law, Donald Trump, will only concede if he thinks the election was fair. Only if he thinks the election was fair. It's up to Donald Trump to decide if the election that he lost was on the up and up. Sunday, the speaker, Mike Johnson, was on ABC News, and he refused to say that Donald Trump lost in 2020. You cannot get Mike Johnson to say Donald Trump lost in 2020. You can barely get him to say Joe Biden is president. He'll just say, well, Joe Biden is in the Oval Office. He was repeatedly pressed by George Stephanopoulos on Sunday. Mike Johnson kept dancing around the question. He said, George, why do you want to relitigate something that happened 4 years ago? We're focused on the future. 2 weeks ago, Speaker Mike Johnson said he would only vote to certify the election for Kamala Harris in 2025 if he thinks the election was fair. On Sunday, when asked to respond to Eric Trump telling the crowd in Butler, Pennsylvania, that Democrats tried to assassinate his father twice, Eric Trump, stochastic terrorism, right? Speaker Mike Johnson was asked to comment on that by George Stephanopoulos, and Speaker Mike Johnson said, well, I can't comment on that since I didn't hear it. And you should watch it. George Stephanopoulos said, what are you talking about? I just played the clip of Eric Trump saying that. You just heard it. When pressed on this by George Stephanopoulos, the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson refused to say Democrats were not behind the 2 assassination attempts. What does that do? What does that do to our politics when the Speaker of the House cannot bring himself to say Democrats were not behind the 2 assassination attempts? What does that do to our country? You could be a Republican. You can believe in everything Mike Johnson believes. Small government, get rid of food stamps, get rid of make this a Christian nation. Everything Mike Johnson wants. But for the Speaker of the House not to condemn Eric Trump for saying Democrats were behind the 2 assassination attempts. I mean, you got to get out and work your ass off to create a blue tsunami. It's not like you haven't been told. If this election, if they steal it, it's not like we haven't been warned. We were warned 4 years ago. It should not be this close. It should not be this close. I mean, it's one thing to steal an election through brute force, but I'm going to go over some polling numbers at the end of the show. She's going to win, but it should not be this close. It's not just a stupid country, it's an immoral country. You know, we've allowed television and the internet to dehumanize enough people. We've been dehumanized. We don't know right from wrong anymore. And we're stupid. We're stupid and dehumanized. We've learned what the plan is. It's not like you haven't been warned. What are you doing for John Tester? What are you doing for Colin Allred in Texas? What are you doing? What are you doing? We've been warned. Judge Tanya Chutkan, who presides over the 2020 election interference trial, which has been delayed by more than a year, she unsealed special counsel Jack Smith's evidentiary filing. She unsealed it last week. Now, to refresh your memory, special counsel Jack Smith last month filed See, this is all confusing, and it's hard to keep track of. We should be talking climate change. We should be focusing on Medicare for all, not this. Special counsel Jack Smith last month filed new superseding indictments against Donald Trump, which Jack Smith claims are all in compliance with the Supreme Court's July 1st ruling that an ex-president can only be tried for crimes he committed in the Oval Office, crimes that involved unofficial acts as chief executive. Running for office, running for re-election, is not an official act as chief executive. In a 154-page filing, Smith listed new evidence that he will present in an evidentiary hearing before Judge Chutkan to decide whether this case can go to trial. Among special counsel Jack Smith's allegations, this was in 2020, according to Jack Smith, Donald Trump planned to claim he beat Joe Biden weeks in advance of the election. Trump was overheard telling Jared and Ivanka after the 2020 election, quote, "It doesn't matter if you won or lost, you still have to fight like hell." On January 6, when told Mike Pence's life was in danger, Trump stared at the television and quietly said, "So what?" Trump privately referred to his top election lawyer, Sidney Powell, as quote-unquote crazy and unhinged. Well, he got that right. On January 5th, 2021, Steve Bannon spoke to Donald Trump just 2 hours before Bannon went on his radio show and said, quote, "All hell is going to break loose on January 6th. Bannon is currently serving time in a federal prison for contempt of Congress after he refused a subpoena from the January 6th committee and wouldn't testify as to what Donald Trump said to him on January 5th. In the lead up to January 6th, Trump and an unnamed co-conspirator told Michigan campaign aides to create a riot inside the building where votes were being tabulated, create chaos, create confusion, frighten election officials into walking away from their jobs. That was the plan in 2020. That is the plan for 2024. A Trump co-conspirator, according to Jack Smith, ordered a Michigan campaign aide to, quote, make them riot. This is as they're counting votes. Make it so they can't count the votes. So I can claim what? As votes, this is Jack Smith, as votes were being tabulated in Pennsylvania, special counsel Jack Smith charges Trump demanded what? Chaos. He said, create disturbances where votes are being counted in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, so the election cannot be verified. Jack Smith, the special counsel, charged that Trump wanted the rioters to storm the Capitol on January 6 in order to delay the certification. The plan being delay, 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 and what? And what? What? Get it to the Supreme Court, who would then turn it over to the House of Representatives. That was the plan 4 years ago. It's the same plan this year. Where did Donald Trump come up with the idea of intimidation when they're tabulating the votes? According to special counsel Jack Smith, the Trump campaign learned all this from the Brooks Brothers riot of 2000. That was where an army of white Republicans wearing Brooks Brothers clothing stormed a Miami-Dade meeting of election workers to stop the count. Stop the count so that George W. Bush would be declared the winner. And they succeeded. The Brooks Brothers riot succeeded. They were intimidated, and they stopped the count. Then it went into the courts. That's the Brooks Brothers riot, and there, right there, back in 2020, let's go big on them. That is Matt Schlapp. Matt Schlapp. Beautiful, beautiful Matt Schlapp, who soon became the head of CPAC and settled out of court. A man accused him of sexual assault, and Matt Schlapp, beautiful Matt Schlapp, settled out of court. You would think if a man or a woman accused me of sexual assault, I would want to clear my name, Matt, especially if you're homophobic and a man accuses you of sexual assault. You would want to clear your name, Matt. But instead you settled out of court because you're so secure about your masculinity. Obviously, you're a heterosexual male who doesn't need to prove that he's straight by going to court. So you just settle out of court. Here's $500,000. Let's pretend it never happened. There's some other men who came forward. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that later. But I do believe he's straight. I think he's all man. Actually, I shouldn't say, I think gay men are all men as well. Jack Smith charges. How long is this show? Is anybody still here? Jack Smith, I'm on my, wait, I don't know who's here, but when you see Giovanni's report from Montana, this will be the last time anybody tunes in. Citizen journalist Giovanni on the ground in Montana. I'm delirious. Jack Smith charges when told Rudy Giuliani couldn't prove election fraud. Donald Trump said, details don't matter. Every single White House official, including Mike Pence, in the lead up to January 6, told Donald Trump he lost. That's why he brought in the outside counsel, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis. They weren't White House officials. He couldn't get White House officials. He couldn't get Republican lawyers to fight for him. He had to bring in his own crew. Everybody told him he lost. Remember Cassidy Hutchinson, the Trump White House aide? She officially endorsed Kamala Harris last week. She worked for Mark Meadows, who was White House chief of staff. Supposedly, Mark Meadows told Jack Smith that he went in and said to Donald Trump on January 6th, they're looking to kill Mike Pence. And Trump looked at him and said, he really let me down. So then when Jared and Sean Hannity got on the phone with Mark Meadows and said, what the hell is going on? Get him to call off the jackals. Meadows reportedly said, he really feels Mike Pence let him down. John Bolton says he's voting for Reagan after Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris. That was his announcement. John Bolton, who was Donald Trump's national security advisor during the perfect call to Ukraine that led to Trump's impeachment, he said he was going to vote for Dick Cheney. But now that Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris, John Bolton says he's going to write in Ronald Reagan's name. So John Bolton, not voting for Trump. John Bolton will always do the patriotic thing unless it conflicts with the release of his new book. Remember during the impeachment, Donald Trump's national security advisor, who was in on the call to Zelensky, John Bolton, refused to testify against Donald Trump because John Bolton had a new book out and he didn't want to reveal what was in it. John Kasich, former governor of Ohio, Republican, said, I'm a lifelong conservative Republican, but I will not be voting for Donald Trump. But he did not endorse Kamala Harris. Bruce Springsteen endorsed Kamala Harris. He called Donald Trump the most dangerous candidate in my lifetime. And his best friend, Barack Obama, hits the campaign trail hard for Harris starting next week. The heavy artillery is coming out next week. It's going to be interesting to see where Obama goes. I'm going to assume Florida and, of course, Pennsylvania. Well, the race is tightening. I told you it was going to tighten. I believe it's going to revert back to what we're going to see 24 hours before Election Day is the whole thing crumbling for Harris. And it's going to revert back to what we saw right after Labor Day. We're going to see it tighten, but it will revert back to the polling averages right after Labor Day. That's my prediction. The polling averages show Harris leads Trump nationally by 2. A couple of days ago, she was leading by 3. A couple of days before that, it was by 4. It's narrowing. Let's go to the blue wall. You know the drill. The blue wall. There it is. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Polling averages show Harris up by 1 in Pennsylvania, up by 1 in Michigan, up by 2 in Wisconsin. It's getting too tight in Pennsylvania. If she doesn't win Pennsylvania, and I knew it was going to be this tight, it just doesn't make me I'm uncomfortable. Trump holds razor-thin leads in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. Harris has a razor-thin lead in Nevada. Those are polling averages. Well, I have a citizen journalist. This cost me a lot of money. I decided to send Giovanni. He's my first citizen journalist. I sent him to Montana to cover the race for Senate, John Tester versus Sheehy. Here is citizen journalist Giovanni, one of my listeners. He files this report on the ground in Montana.
The problem with John Tester, he is no longer a Montanan. Tester votes the party line just to, how you say, line his pockets. If the bill hurts Montana, then he votes for it, because the Democratic Party said to. Tester is, how you say, a party line guy and needs to be removed because he is not for Montana. He's not one of us. He is, how you say, a carpetbagger. John Tester voted to keep the borders open. John Tester voted to send hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. John Tester, like all Democrats, supports Hamas and their baby beheading. John Tester supports the Mexican cartels bringing fentanyl to Montana. Like all Democrats, he also hates the military and despises veterans because they survived their tour of duty. I leave you with this one last thought. 13 service members in Afghanistan, 1 Texas National Guardsman, 2 Navy SEALs in the Mediterranean Sea, 3 soldiers in Jordan. If you voted for Biden, then their blood is on your hands. He can go, how you say, frig himself.
That is citizen journalist Giovanni. I sent him to Montana to cover the Senate race, and that's his report. And we'll be hearing from other citizen journalists in the lead up to the election. Anybody can be a journalist. It's just that easy. Thank you, Giovanni. Great job. Great job. This has been the mop-up for October 7th, 2024. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Please subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter, hit the like button so I remain in your feed, subscribe, leave a comment. I'm sure you want to tell me how much you loved citizen journalist Giovanni and how you're going to want to hear more from our citizen journalists. Where am I? Please go to shopdavidfeldman.com and waste your money on crap you don't need, like the worst case scenario mug. And Halloween is just around the corner. You want to get your 2029 inaugural ball collector's mug. That's Donald Trump and a very happy Melania. I do think that's pretty great, actually. And there's another mug for Halloween. It's Donald Trump with his fangs saying, "Got blood." I like this one, Count Trumpula, because it's stupid. You remember Friday the 13th, Part 2. This is January the 6th, Part 2. Not so good. Kind of stupid. I wouldn't buy that. The Blair Witch Project 2025. I would buy that for somebody who thinks they're a lot smarter than they actually are. And this one, don't buy, Felony Count Dracula. That is an example of not knowing when to stop. I should redo that as Stop the Count Dracula, right? Doesn't want them to count the votes, so it's Stop the Count Dracula. So don't buy the Felony Count Dracula. What else do I got here? The MAGA hats. People are buying a couple of these. This is for your MAGA moron friends. I like this. On the back it says low IQ individual. Buy that for your friend who's voting for Trump. What else? MAGA for Kamala. And MAGA moron, which I do think this is my favorite. And this, Genghis Khan. What else? Trump 28. Is anybody still here? David Ferdman. All right. Thank you to Mila. By the way, this is also a good one. Uncle Scam. I have to buy a new camera and a new face. I need a new face. Uncle Scam. Thank you to Mila and Bob in the chat room for keeping. How is this show this long? God. Thank you to Bob and Mila. What else? I forgot. Something, and direct all your fan mail for Giovanni, our citizen journalist, to me. Thank you I'll see everybody tomorrow at 2:30 a.m. Thank you for putting up with my nonsense if you're still here. Bye.